Put your seatbelt on, Ellie.
Well, what about the guy?
He ain't even hurt.
So, I have bought not one, not two, not even three, but four entire games consoles specifically for this game. I literally only bought a Sony console post PlayStation 2 for the sole, bar one, reason of playing The Last Guardian. I also pre-ordered it at least 3 separate times that I can remember, because it came up for sale with a firm release date more than once before it finally actually arrived. The likelihood of it releasing on the PSP was not something I ever put any stock in, but after things started to drag on, I thought it was best to get one, just in case. Plus, I happened to have a chunk of spare dollar at the time, and the PlayStation Vita was bought largely for my wife. But the point still stands. 4 Sony consoles for just this one game. That's how eagerly I was awaiting its release. And I was not disappointed. I know a number of people found it to be lukewarm, at best. I was not one of them. And though I don't think it's the best entry in the Team Eco catalogue, it's only bad by comparison the same way, say, $10 bajillion is poor compared to $12 bajillion, you know? I'd pretty much put it as joint second with Shadow of the Colossus, a game I will most certainly be coming back to talk about at some point, for certain. I just don't think it's necessary for this specific series I've been working on. Basically, it's not as closely correlated to the type of game The Last of Us and Eco are. The Shadow of the Colossus, that is. Whilst all 4 have a focus, or at least elements of companionship, 2 characters working in tandem, Colossus makes it more of an incidental than core facet. Okay, so do you remember how I said that The Last Guardian does what The Last of Us wanted to do, but better? Well, if not, I have like 2 prior videos that you should probably check out first. It's a fair whack of content, but hey, other people do the whole shameless self-promo thing, so why not? Anywho, yeah, I said that, and that's why this is the concluding thesis in this grand epic of self-indulgent I've spent far too long working on. Well, way too long making, at least, since the delays have largely been due to me not working. But enough. Let's get focused and tie this all up with a nice, neat, cute little bow.
Moving on.
When I was around 14 years old, British TV had an early morning time slot for screening anime. I think it was weekly, and I'm pretty sure it was over the weekend, but I've been to sleep since then, many times. There were also more frequent anime shows and OVAs on satellite TV, our version of cable, Sky with the dishes. But I didn't have access to that. Not as much access as I did to terrestrial TV. So terrestrial and VHS tapes was how I experienced most of the anime I saw at the time. One night in particular really stuck with me, marking the first time I really started to understand, well, I saw Patlabor the movie. Yeah, Patlabor. I'm British. You cut out the U and it doesn't look like Labour to me, so Patlabor. And this scene, which has been slowly playing out in the background, left an indelible mark on my young mind. It has always stuck with me as a watershed moment of enlightenment. It wasn't the first time I'd found myself enraptured by more cerebral cinema, because I saw Blade Runner when I was 8, the theatrical cut, the one with the atrocious narration, and it remained my favourite film for a long time. But this was the moment when I just got it. and it has lived in my memory ever since. Looking at it now, even without dialogue, which it doesn't have anyway, though you may be able to hear the music depending on how well I've done the sound balance. But that is my entire point. You don't need any dialogue. You don't need any sound. Just seeing the visual flow, how one moment goes into another. You can easily work out exactly what's going on. You probably already know if you've been even paying like half a mind to what's going on. Two men, detectives, are travelling to different locations to gather information, evidence. What they're actually looking for isn't relevant to what I'm getting at. But that's what's happening, and completely out of context, you can discern that pretty much immediately. There's a lot more to the scene, like how it builds on the setting and whatnot, but that's also irrelevant. What is relevant, however, is how this relates to The Last of Us. No, it's not because Naughty Dog were deeply moved by Pat Labor or anything. I mean, they might have been, I don't know. And guess what? Yep, that's right. Irrelevant. Anywho, what I want to really do is compare it to a specific moment in the game. This scene, which you are watching right now, assuming you're actually watching. Because again, without need of sound, you just know what's happening. It's a bit more direct, maybe, but it's still immediately obvious. I bring this up because it serves as a microcosm of my entire issue with Naughty Dog's design philosophy. Issue maybe not the right word, but we'll go with that. The way they construct and present their games. Their entire catalogue, as far as I'm aware, certainly everything I'm familiar with and have played, which is far from exhaustive, I freely admit. In fact, I think The Last of Us is the only one of their games I've ever finished. Part 2 I've played some, but probably only about a quarter. The rest I'm entirely familiar with solely from other people. But I'm confident that I'm on the mark on this one. As I mentioned in my previous video, I think they, Neil Druckmann certainly, don't really want to make games. In fact, I'm pretty sure most high-budget development leads, at the very least, certainly narrative leads, don't want to make games. We still have this weird stigma about games not being valid as a true art form. They're toys for children, even when you can choke a hooker to death and desecrate her corpse. Nay, most of them, they want to make real art. They want to make true art. They want to make cinema, because that's cis business.
Search your feelings, you know it to be true.
And that scene with Ellie and Joel, that's a great piece of audiovisual art. It's concise, precise, and affecting. Even sans context, it works, and that's great, legitimately. I've been saying for a very long time, the people at Naughty Dog have some genuine talent. What they do it really well, from both sides. They know how to make and present a good narrative, and they know how to make solid, even great gameplay. But there's a disconnect between the two. Like oil and water, I've heard it described, and I think that's a good assessment. You see, this is at the very core of my thesis. They don't really want to make games. They want to do screenplays. They want to make cinema. And they come at it from that perspective. So when the narrative clashes with the gameplay, the latter is what's sacrificed or hand-waved away. A genuine, I feel, example of ludonarrative dissonance, because that term does have utility. Instead of looking for synergy between the two, they prioritize one over the other, which is not something they are uniquely guilty of, far from it. And others have had the same issue in the opposite direction. I can't be asked thinking of examples of that, though. I don't want to go off on any more tangents. For once.
This is awkward.
I've heard a lot of complaints about The Last Guardian, and dude, seriously, I hear you. I get it. I understand. I even agree to a point. Trico wasn't designed as a system of gameplay elements. I mean, he literally was, because it's a game, and, game. But that's not how he was conceived. He's a character, a thinking, sentient being in his own right, or at least a simulacrum of one, with his own mind, his own goals, and his own methods and methodology. As the game progresses, he can be guided, influenced, and even, to an extent, directed. But he isn't a mindless automaton that just does see plant, kill plant. Kudos if you get that reference, by the way. Okay, I mean, he objectively is all of those things, like functionally, objectively objective, not the way people use the word to mean that makes my argument stronger. He is like literally. It's a series of programmed responses with percentage chances. But those behavior trees, or whichever method was used for his system, are constructed in such a way as to simulate a thinking mind, an independent being. So no matter how clearly you know what you want him to do, what you need him to do, he might not do it. At least not until a seemingly arbitrary condition is met behind the scenes. The most common issue being that people are spamming commands, thinking that will make him do what you want more quickly. But if you've ever spent time with a real animal, be that non-human or otherwise, because let's remember, humans are animals and they have their own minds as well, you'll know that's a terrible way of getting the result you want. All animals function far more efficiently and promptly to simple, direct task management. See plant, kill plant. This is why instructions of a recipe, for example, are laid out in very simple, separate steps. You break a larger task down into smaller, much more easily digestible, immediate chunks. Just like Trico. So tell him to jump, for example, and then give him a moment to process, literally, the instruction, and he'll jump most of the time. Which is the second common issue and the primary complaint, at least that I'm familiar with. He doesn't always do what you want, which is kinda annoying, just a tiny little bit. You don't typically want to be wrestling with unruly game systems, especially not for something as simple as fucking jumping. You know what I mean? And with Trico, that's what you spend the entire game doing. If you're not on board with treating him like an independent mind, someone you have to work with rather than command, then you're going to have a very bad time. Which is absolutely fine. If it's not for you, then it's not for you. People make that same complaint about Argo in Shadow of the Colossus, but that's a whole other story. Foreshadowing. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, so it's not really hard to figure out. This was actually a pretty big concern for Naughty Dog, I believe, with it having a focus on, or at least a push for, stealth gameplay, The Last of Us that is. They didn't want players to ever feel like they were being screwed over by an unresponsive AI, wandering out directly in front of an enemy and blowing everything at the drop of a hat. That's why Ellie, Tess, and everyone else are just invisible to the Fungus Boys until you, the player, Joel the Avatar, are directly noticed. Which is a good idea conceptually, but oh, look, all of this was relevant. That's exactly what I mean when I say the gameplay is sacrificed in favour of narrative.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
There's a specific moment in The Last Guardian that I want to talk about. A contrast, if you will, with the shooty bang moment from The Last of Us. Because it's a great way to demonstrate a key fundamental difference between cinema and video games. Or, more accurately, what games are. Or rather, what games should and could be. No tangents, let's just get into it. So, what's happening here? Out of context, The big stone dude grabbed the player character. Then Trico jumps in to save him after a moment's hesitation. You can kinda get it, maybe, if you go back and play it over a couple times. But in isolation, it doesn't have any particularly powerful emotional effect. Not like a scene from a movie that can be appreciated solely on the merits of the performances and cinematography. That's because this moment is a culmination of several hours of persistent, reinforced moments of gameplay. I mean, the moment when Darth Vader says, "Luke, I am your father," deliberate misquote by the way, it doesn't carry the same weight if you haven't seen everything before it. And, okay, it's a poor example because the response is kind of goofy, but just go with it. Anyway, even without all that, you can still get what's going on. You still know it's a deeply troubling revelation. It really hits Luke in the feels, as the kids would say. Do they still say that? I don't know, I fucking hate that term. But Trico jumping over that gap, the big, weird ferret, dog, cat, snake, bird thing didn't let you die. That's nice, I guess. But look at this. Without context, this moment does still make sense. It's not a particularly affecting moment, even when you're playing it the first time round. It's just a curio. But you can clearly see that Trico is kind of nervous. The stained glass mirror thing on the floor, he don't like that very much. So when you're playing the game, and you come to the moments later when you see them again, you very quickly get to know what's expected of you. Trico isn't going to move forward until you get the glass eyes out of the way, one way or another. And some of these sections are quite lengthy climbing puzzles. You spend a good chunk of time learning that this is the way it's going to be. They reinforce that over and over. See glass, kill glass. So let's go back and look again. You might have already noticed that stone guard, terracotta soldier, whatever they are, those chappies are carrying smaller versions of the same thing. Trico's eyes are glowing in the same way. His body is moving nervously. He doesn't want to be here. He doesn't like these things. Not one little bit. We don't even know why. We actually never learn definitively. But we know he can't get past until we deal with this. But when you bump these guys from behind, they drop their shields, but they pick them back up pretty much immediately. You can't seem to do anything to get rid of them. So when they grab you, which causes them to take you into a glowing doorway and lead to a game over, something else you've seen repeatedly beforehand, even if you haven't had an actual game over, you get that them grabbing you is a bad idea. When that happens, you're going to be like, well, damn, I guess that's not it. I have to think of something else. Maybe I missed something. Maybe I went the wrong way. Guess I'll die, then try again. You have just enough time to think of all this, to process it, to let it all go through your head, because it's a lot faster for all those musings to pop into your head and go through it than it is for me to spell it out, because you don't really think in words, it's just all like a stream of consciousness. But you have just enough time to see all of this, process it, see Trico distressed at what's about to happen. And then this happens. I don't know if it's really going to have any impact on you from me just walking you through it, but when you're playing the game, when you're in the right frame of mind, when you're there and you're invested, this hits on an emotional level that only a game can manage. In that moment, when Trico launches himself against a literal wall of his own fears, when he sacrifices his own well-being, he's not saving the boy. In that moment, he's your companion, he's your friend, and he is saving you. But wait, there's more. Because this doesn't end with Trico jumping in. It doesn't end when he smashes all of the statues down into tiny little pieces. Have you ever been in a high tension situation? I'm sure pretty much all of us have. The particulars don't matter. Let's say it's the end result of a car crash, whatever. Just think a moment. Think about a moment. any moment, when your adrenaline was up, stress levels were high, just because the immediate issue may have been resolved. Okay, I gave an example here. I really should read these ahead of time. So let's say you've just been told you might lose your job because of misconduct or something. Whatever. Again, it doesn't really matter, but let's say that's it. It's a car crash. It's losing your job. Whatever. You've been called into your manager's office, told you did or didn't do whatever thing. Completely untrue, maybe. You argue your case, show that it's wrong, and everything settles. It's all been dealt with. But in that moment, do you just automatically become calm again? It's dealt with now, doesn't matter anymore? Everything drains away and it's all back to business as usual? I mean, maybe. Some people absolutely can compartmentalize like that, but typically, nah man. Your heckles are up. You're still lingering in that fight or flight mode. You need some time to center yourself and get back to your baseline. Could take weeks, months, or if you're autistic like I am, maybe it never goes away. And you just do the best you can to keep moving forward. But it still comes up, time after time. Yeah. Point is, it's not an instant change. And the same is true in The Last Guardian. Trico is incensed, absolutely enraged, furious. We don't even know why, really. We can guess, but that's it, we can guess. All we can tell for sure is that he's grown fond of the boy, and those statues piss him off, and those weird symbol things. Of course, that weird symbol scares the crap out of him. That doesn't really go away. But again, in that moment, the safety of his human friend, of you, took precedence over his own terror. Distress has given way to an overpowering rage, so he continues to rail against the injustices of the world, or whatever it is. And at this point, the player is tasked with showing him comfort. You save him, calming the swirl of emotion running through him. Something which we have done multiple times already in-game. And it's not really all that different this time. But the intensity is greatly elevated. And maybe we'll call to mind the very beginning of the game. See, the first time we encounter Trico, he's lay on the ground, pierced with spears, and displays intense agitation. I mean, he's in pain for a start. So much so, he kicks the boy clear across the room, cavern, more accurately, and makes him an aspiring hostile NPC in a Yakuza game. It's another moment where it takes some time and patience to both soothe and earn his trust. But why this really stands out is because that scene is a protracted affair. It goes on for a while. It's teaching you how the game works, tacitly. But now, despite the ferocity of Trico's rage, it takes naught but a few words and some gentle petting to bring him down from the boil, further reinforcing the bond the two have developed over the preceding hours. It doesn't take a long time now. You've built trust with him. Just a few words from you are enough to calm him down, get him over that moment. Even if it's not gone away, he's at least, focus. So that's it, right? I've proven my point. I've clearly argued why The Last Guardian is better than The Last of Us. Like a YouTube philosopher, I've destroyed you with logic and facts. Checkmate, atheists. And, no. Maybe? That depends on you, really. Because here's the real thing. I'm not saying either approach is better. No, really, I'm not. Or, despite stating the opposite several times, I'm not even saying that this makes The Last Guardian a better game. Because really, that's not what I was ever trying to do. Rather, this is a more personal expression of how I think the latter better utilizes the medium of games, the functions, the systems. The Last of Us employs great screenwriting techniques. The Last Guardian utilizes game mechanics.
I don't know.
See what I mean? We've had a lot of discourse, both about these games, others, and the medium as a whole. In fact, The Last of Us has been talked about just recently, so this is oddly topical for me, about how it does not, and could utilise storytelling techniques to create unique experiences, games, how they can do that. But it's all entirely subjective. It always is. For many, clearly, Naughty Dog's methodology of taking filmmaking methods and layering them over the top of a game work expertly. Some people just respond to that approach. Some people are much more visual. Or audio, I suppose. Is audio a word? They respond to sight and sound. I mean, video games are sight and sound. But anyway, the same way some people prefer text, like reading a book, to seeing something play out on a television or cinema screen. The relative sale figures of the two games does tend to suggest Naughty Dog's approach has resonated with more people, though it also had a lot more funding and it came from Sony and blah 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 blah, but still. And that's fine, I guess. I don't really like it though. But I don't really dislike it either. I'm just saying it's not the only way. And most importantly, it's a layer of duct tape awkwardly, if firmly, bonding together two disparate elements. Binding them and penetrating them and universe and all that together so that they become inseparable, seamless, but clunky and bulky. Whilst Team Ico's approach, Ueda Fumito's approach, fundamentally strives for ultimate cohesion. The story is told not only through words, but also the world we play in. And most importantly of all, the way we play. The things we, as the players, do. How we engage with the systems, with the controller, with the world, everything. I don't honestly know how much impact the way you play has on Trico, outside of more direct elements like this. But I do know a huge number of people complained about how difficult it was getting him to do what was needed. I mentioned that earlier. Like having him jump up to a ledge, for example. A notable percentage of players were frustrated with how he never seemed to respond immediately. And I'm not the first to point out that some players spam commands at him without factoring in the way he was designed. He's not a mindless automaton, as I said. He's a simulacrum. There's a little difference there. Nuanced, you know. Built around the idea of point at thing, press button, go to thing. That's not what he is. He was always intended to be presented with his own mind, like an actual animal. And even other human beings with the capacity to understand exactly what you are asking of them can experience a delay in responding to instructions. You know, cognitive overload, if nothing else, or they might just not have heard what you said, or maybe you said it in a way that doesn't register with them. I mean, if you use a word they're not familiar with and they don't understand what it means, they're not going to know what it freaking means, is it? Or if you're like, I speak English, if I'm trying to explain something to a Japanese person and they don't speak English, it's going to take them a while to figure out what I mean, even if I'm really simple. And Trico is best instructed if you bear that in mind. Tell him what you want to do and wait. Give him a moment to think it through. And maybe, my actual point, he'll become more responsive over time, based on the way you interact with him. That's the part I'm not sure about. I don't know if that actually happens. I don't know if that changes everything. But every time I've played the game, I always approached him like I would, well, any animal. Patience. Don't expect him to be a mindless robot that follows instructions without question. Take the time to build a rapport. Pet him after every encounter, even after most actions I've tasked him with completing, like jump up on that ledge, then give him a quick pat after he does it. Be patient, you know? And I've never had any real complaints about the way he responds, personally. There are a few times, mostly early in the game, where I've had to be a bit more pushy, because there hasn't been much response, but I do believe that's by design. Like the first time you see water, Trico is apprehensive about jumping in, which has always puzzled me because it never seems to bother him again. It takes a little coaxing to get him to come down, but anywho. Maybe it's because I'm a parent, and I have several younger siblings, and nieces and nephews. But I've been around children for literally my entire life. I know I've mentioned that before, and you'll have a much easier time with kids if you'll learn a little patience. Kids aren't stupid. They just lack experience. Just because you know the best thing to do, like how important it is to go to bed early, and even if the kid gets what you mean, that doesn't mean they're just gonna go straight to bed, especially if they're doing something fun at the time. You know what I mean? So I think of Trico in the same way. I know what to do. I know what I want him to do, but I give him the grace to come around to it in his own time. Chance for him to understand. And again, I don't know, but it really feels like showing that patience earlier in the game offsets the delay as things progress. It really does feel like if you take more time with him earlier on, he'll be more responsive later. I mean, he probably will be anyway because you progress through the game, but it always felt to me like patience earlier pays off later. By the time I'm at the very end of the game, we're in sync. Even the specific moment I've been talking about, despite how emotional he's supposed to be, he seems to calm down pretty damn fast whenever I play it. But not in an unrealistic way. You know, after you give him the pets, it doesn't take very long. It's like he's learned to trust me. And all it takes is a little reassurance at that point. So, which one is better? That's the wrong question. Which one do I prefer? Well, duh. But which one makes better, more direct utilization of the nature of video games? I think it's incredibly easy to see how it's The Last Guardian. The most affecting moments are all done entirely through gameplay. And it's not like there are no cutscenes either, because there are a few. But the real meat and two veg of everything, you have to do it yourself. You're an active participant in the drama, so to speak. Like the final action you take right at the very end of the game. I'm not ready to talk about that, so moving on. This took far too long for me to finish for a multitude of reasons. But now that it's done, I guess all that remains to say is I have no clue how long the next one will take, though I've started writing, but I have so many ideas it's not even funny. So there will be more. And until then, like, comment, agree, call me a dipshit, whatever you want. Check out my still completely ignored Patreon even. It's all up to you, I'm not your dad. I really suck at this part, don't I? Well, whatever. Until next time, thank you for watching.